They said he could sense danger before it walked in the room, like a street dog that had lived too long to trust a hand that fed it. Anthony Casso was born in Brooklyn, 1942, small kid, sharp eyes, raised on the corners where silence meant survival. His father was a longshoreman, his mother prayed hard, and the streets did the rest. He didn't grow up dreaming about power, just protection. In Bensonhurst, protection was power. He watched men in suits who never smiled. They ran the numbers, collected envelopes, disappeared when cops came around. "Those guys don't get pushed around," he told a friend one day. "Yeah," the friend replied, "but they don't live long either." Anthony just smiled, a quiet kind, like he already knew the rules didn't apply to him. By 16, he wasn't afraid of fists or knives. He learned to move first, talk later. And when the old-timers noticed how calm he stayed in chaos, they gave him a nickname, Gaspipe. No reason, no story, just a name that sounded like trouble. He liked how it sounded. But that calm? It wouldn't last forever. Something darker was already watching him back. Brooklyn in the 1950s wasn't kind, but it was consistent. You knew who ran the block, who you owed, and who could bury you without anyone asking questions. Anthony learned early that loyalty wasn't a word, it was a weapon. Break it, and you bled for it. He started running errands for wise guys, carrying envelopes, driving cars, keeping his mouth shut. "Don't ask, don't repeat," one of them told him. And he didn't. Silence became his armor. He'd come home late, hands smelling of gasoline and money. His mother asked, "Anthony, where do you go at night?" He'd kiss her forehead. "Work, Ma. Just work." But she knew. Every mother in Brooklyn knew when her son crossed that invisible line between boy and man, and into something colder. Gaspipe's gift wasn't brutality. It was memory. He remembered every insult, every favor, every man who looked away when he needed them most. It made him dangerous in a quiet way, the kind that didn't need to shout. To his crew, he was steady, dependable, sharp, never drunk, never sloppy. To his enemies, he was invisible until it was too late. And soon, everyone would learn why that silence made him unstoppable. But silence has limits, especially in a world built on whispers. By the late 60s, Gaspipe wasn't just another street soldier, he was a storm in slow motion. The Lucchese family saw it early. He didn't brag, didn't panic, didn't hesitate. When others argued, he listened. When others waited, he moved. His first big favor came when a bookmaker owed money to the wrong man. Anthony handled it, no noise, no mess, just a message left on a doorstep that said, "Pay next time." That night, his envelope came back thicker. Respect had a price, and he just learned how to set it. "Kid," an older capo told him once, "you don't act like the rest of these punks." Anthony shrugged. "I watch. They talk." The old man nodded. "That's why you'll last." By his 30s, he had built his own crew, disciplined, loyal, efficient. He ran gambling, construction, protection, all with quiet precision. He didn't crave fame, he craved control. Even rival families said the same thing, Gaspipe never misses twice. In a world of chaos, he was order. Calm. Ruthless. Predictable until you crossed him. But power always invites one thing, envy. And in the shadows, someone had already started counting his mistakes. By the early 1980s, Gaspipe Casso had become more than a soldier, he was an institution. He walked into rooms and men straightened their backs without knowing why. No shouting, no theatrics. Just quiet authority that carried the weight of a gun you couldn't see. He ran operations from a diner booth in Brooklyn, always the same one, always the corner seat facing the door. Cigarette smoke curled above him as he discussed business in a whisper. Construction deals, narcotics, labor unions, all under his fingertips, flowing like clockwork. He believed in rules. We don't hurt civilians. We don't bring cops to our doorstep. We do it clean. That code kept his empire stable for a while. Anthony wasn't reckless like the others. He invested, delegated, and rewarded loyalty fast. He gave men respect before they asked for it, and they'd die before betraying him. But the calm he built was deceptive. Beneath it, alliances shifted like sand. New faces wanted their cut. Old friends started counting favors like debts. And even the sharpest men forget one thing. Power doesn't vanish overnight, it leaks, drop by drop, through the cracks you refuse to see. It started small, a missing envelope here, a delayed call there. In Gaspipe's world, those weren't accidents. They were signals. And he noticed every one. He'd sit in his car outside a restaurant, headlights off, watching who came and went. His mind replayed every handshake, every glance that lasted a second too long. Something's off, he told his driver one night. With who? Everyone, he said quietly. Rumors were floating, that some of his men were talking to the feds, that someone in the Lucchese family wanted him out. The streets had changed, greed was louder now, fear weaker. The new generation didn't understand the silence that had kept them alive. One evening, a man he trusted didn't show for a meet. Another disappeared the next day. Gaspipe didn't ask questions. He simply made calls, quiet ones, and those names stopped appearing on the payroll. To outsiders, it looked like control. But inside, it was paranoia wrapped in logic. He told himself he was cleaning house, restoring order. But deep down, he knew. The cracks weren't in his crew, they were in the code itself. And once the code breaks, the whole house starts to shake. By the mid-1980s, paranoia wasn't a weakness, it was survival. Anthony Gaspipe Casso started noticing things ordinary men would ignore. Cars parked too long. Phones that clicked before the dial tone. Faces in diners pretending to read newspapers. The FBI had shifted focus. They weren't chasing petty criminals anymore, they wanted bosses. Wiretaps, informants, hidden cameras, the streets buzzed with ghosts. Gaspipe stopped using phones. He changed cars every week. He never slept in the same place twice. Trust no one, he told his wife. Not even me. She looked at him, half frightened, half resigned. What are you turning into, Anthony? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was already closing in. Even his partners, men he'd raised, were flipping for deals. They'd trade decades of loyalty for a shorter sentence and a witness protection zip code. Gaspipe swore he'd never been that way. Better a cell than a collar, he muttered. But the pressure was relentless, invisible and constant. The FBI had his picture on the wall. And somewhere, one of his closest friends was already wearing a wire. He just didn't know which one. And when he found out, Brooklyn would never be the same again. It happened fast, the way storms do when you don't see the clouds. One night, Gaspipe's world cracked open. The feds hit hard, raids, arrests, names on paper he'd never thought he'd see. Men he had made, men who had eaten at his table, were suddenly testifying. He tried to move quick, disappear into the maze he'd built for years. Safe houses, coded calls, burner cars. But you can't outrun a system that's already inside your walls. When his right-hand man, Vic Amuso, went down, Gaspipe knew he was next. For months, he hid underground. The newspapers called him public enemy number one. He read those headlines with a bitter smirk. Funny, he whispered. They never print the good years. Then one cold morning, they got him, quiet arrest, no drama. He didn't fight, didn't shout. Just stared straight ahead as if calculating the years ahead of him. The silence that once made him powerful was now his prison. He'd built an empire on fear, and now he'd face a world where fear meant nothing. Because behind bars, the only thing left to fear is memory. In prison, Gaspipe Casso became a ghost that still breathed. No suits, no soldiers, no respect, just a number stitched to a khaki uniform. But even locked up, his presence carried weight. Inmates whispered his name like a curse. Guards avoided his stare. He adapted quickly, the same way he had on the streets. Woke up early, cleaned his cell, folded everything with surgical precision. Discipline was his last weapon. He'd sit by the small window for hours, watching the light crawl across the concrete. "Same sun," he muttered, "different angle." For a time, he cooperated with the feds, feeding them names, exposing rot within the Mafia itself. But Gaspipe wasn't built for half measures. The deal soured, and the government turned its back. He became what he always feared, expendable. Years passed. The silence grew heavy, deeper than before. He thought of his mother's voice, the smell of Bensonhurst bread, the laughter of men long gone. He'd outlive them all, but at what cost? Sometimes, the guards would hear him whisper, "Loyalty was supposed to save us." No one replied. Because in that cage, the only loyalty left was to the past. Years blurred together. The man who once terrified the Mafia now shuffled through prison halls with gray hair and tired eyes. Gaspipe was in his 70s, slower, quieter, but his mind stayed sharp as a blade that refused to dull. He'd sit in the yard under a dying oak tree, talking to no one. Sometimes, younger inmates would approach him, curious. "Mr. Casso," one asked, "was it worth it? All that power?" Gaspipe looked up, half smiling. "Kid, power's just debt with a gun." He started writing notes, memories, lessons, small confessions. Not for fame. For clarity. He knew history would paint him as a monster, a killer, a traitor to the code. Maybe it was true. But to him, it had always been survival. He never begged for forgiveness, he didn't believe in it. But he understood something he never did before: fear fades. Legacy doesn't. As the days grew shorter, he found peace in routine again, folding, cleaning, remembering. He had outlived rivals, bosses, and even the system that once ruled him. But time was coming for him, too. And before it did, he had one last truth to tell. They say a man's life can be measured by what he regrets, and by what he'd still do again. For Anthony Gaspipe Casso, that balance never came easy. In his final years, sitting in a federal medical prison, he'd wake before dawn, staring at the walls that never blinked. The world outside had changed, the streets he ruled were now coffee shops and condos. The code he'd lived by, broken by everyone he trusted, no longer existed. But he never blamed the streets. He blamed himself for believing loyalty could survive greed, and fear could buy respect forever. "Everybody pays," he once said softly. "Some with time. Some with truth. Me? I paid with both." He died behind bars in 2020, quiet, uncelebrated, unrepentant. Yet, his name still echoes through Mafia history, a shadow no one dares to ignore. In the end, Gaspipe's story wasn't about power or violence. It was about the cost of never letting go, of always needing to win, even when there was nothing left to gain. He outlived the world he built, not because he was lucky, but because he never broke his word. Don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gangster stories like this one.